Fantasy is full of worlds where people believe in magic, who use magic, like Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats. People accept magic as an indisputable fact, which is interesting because for most of human history this has also been the case, but often not the way we like to portray it in fantasy. I talk about writing and world building in fantasy because it's my job, I wrote a bunch of books on it, and you can actually pick these up at the link down below if you like these videos and you want to learn more, or you can scan the QR code on screen right now. It's pretty cool I get to sponsor my videos with my stuff because of you. In fantasy, we can get so fixated on magic as a power system that we can forget about it as a social phenomenon, as a way people think. Like, let me ask you a question. Is it magic to use garlic to ward off evil spirits? Kinda, but not really. People believed garlic could ward off blood-sucking mosquitoes, so why not blood-sucking spirits? The ancient Greeks thought maybe magnets had souls in them because they could move things around. And mercury? I mean, come on, that's gotta have some kind of power, and I'm sure we can figure it out by drinking it as many different ways as possible. For most of human history, amulets were widely regarded as methods of healing and protection, but they weren't really thought of as magical. And then there's gemstones like hematite, bloodstone, red jasper, which all had some kind of essence of blood in them, concentrated. And so people thought they could naturally help with the flow of blood by grinding it down, and guess what? Drinking it. Silver was a pure metal, maybe associated with the moon, and so had other properties which were kind of associated with those. It's not as simple as saying magic was just primitive science, even though it did overlap with that. People historically felt they were surrounded by things they couldn't necessarily touch or see, but they could definitely feel, that they knew were real. Think about plague, or the power of time and rotting and rust, temperature fluctuations. And so they believed lots of things like garlic and mercury and magnets had invisible properties just as much as visible ones too. That might sound like a very soft magic system to us, but it's also a fundamentally different way of viewing the world. They had all these ideas about the natural qualities of things in the world around them. Trees, metals, colors, gems, often applying real things incorrectly where they didn't apply. So kinda magic, but kinda not. We can call this messy magical belief, and it was everywhere in human history. It varied intensely from place to place, even person to person, and yet magic in our fantasy worlds is often really quite simple in comparison. Not only in the shape our magic systems themselves take, but in the kinds of magic people believe in our worlds. And that's because world building a magic system from the ground up, where you, the author, understand how your world works, and you're looking at how these powers are going to impact your politics and economy and warfare, is a very different thing from normal people attempting to infer an understanding of their world from observations without much help. Basically, magic is complicated. A lot of fantasy worlds have a strangely clear line between what people think of as magic and not magic, which wasn't particularly clear historically, but more fundamentally, they often lack a lot of this messy magical belief. Which is weird because not only would this kind of magical belief still be around even if magic was real, but it'd arguably be even more common and pervasive. Like, let's take a very clearly defined, simple, well-understood elemental magic system in bending from Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a world where you can be born with the ability to manipulate the elements with martial arts moves. And here's a question. Would fire divination, real or not, be considered firebending? Fire divination is the practice of reading messages in flames and ashes and burnt wood, interpreting signs and giving guidance and prophecies. It's exactly the kind of superstition which would attach itself to firebending. In fact, it even appears in the show in the episode The Fortune Teller, but it's portrayed as this totally separate thing. The fact that firebending is real in this world and does have these sort of soft spiritual powers means this sort of belief would thrive. Or what about the idea that scattering ashes across your floor might hold water spirits at bay? Or think about essential oils. Would that attach itself to waterbending? It's a kind of healing water supposedly, and waterbending has healing powers. It's a common kind of messy magical belief, even today when people are widely educated, which is not the case for a ton of fantasy worlds, which are low-tech, low education, low information, and there may genuinely be spirits from another realm interfering with the physical world who hate garlic. A lot of this is going to depend on how well your magic is understood, but all these sorts of beliefs are going to naturally sprout from the magic that is real, like pseudoscience sprouts from real science and blurs the line between fact and fiction. People will bring messy magical belief everywhere we can, especially if the world is full of other things that we don't understand, like
fucking magnets, how do they work?
Like, why does mint make your mouth feel cold? And why does drinking mercury make you feel bad? And all this is going to be especially the case if you have a really soft magic system with kind of vague and unpredictable rules and limits and powers, but definitely real, giving just much more room for this kind of messy magical belief. And you might be thinking, well, a really hard magic system is probably going to be immune to a lot of this. But no, let's take Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, a world where ingesting certain metals can give you powers, like 10 heightens your senses to a superhuman level, a very hard magic system. But I gotta ask you, what about mercury? It's about as close to a magic metal we have, it definitely impacts the brain, and people in this world know that most elementers can only digest one metal anyway, so maybe mercury is just a really soft and subtle version of this? It's an easy leap to make. Likewise, unknowledgeable peasants might naturally come to the belief that having a tin amulet might give you better hearing. I mean, it is absolutely a property of tin in this world. But I didn't see a lot of this messy kind of magical belief in the story. We think a lot about how the rules, limits, and costs of our magic system would change our world building, but rarely about what people would project onto the rules, limits, and costs themselves. The messy magical belief which would muddy our understanding of how the magic system works, but also make your world feel more alive and deep and lived in, because people are messy where our neat little magic systems often aren't. If your magic system relied on burning precious animal materials like ivory or bird feathers or rhino horn, then of course people are going to take that and apply it to stag antlers and shark teeth. I almost want to encourage you to have kind of like two sets of rules for your magic system. The ones which work, and the ones which people believe work, with all this messy magical belief, and to play with the ambiguity between them. We actually get to see a little bit of this in A Song of Ice and Fire, in the one chapter from Melisandre's point of view, one of the only characters in the entire series that we do actually know definitely does have some kind of real magic. 3 tallow candles burned upon her windowsill to keep the terrors of the night at bay. 4 more flickered beside her, 2 either side. The fire must never ever be allowed to go out. The red priestess closed her eyes and said a prayer, then opened them once more to face the hearthfire. Visions danced before her, gold and scarlet, flickering, forming and melting and dissolving into one another, shapes strange and terrifying and seductive. It was an art. R'hllor spoke to his chosen ones through blessed fire, in a language of ash and cinder and twisting flame that only a god could truly grasp. She had a smoke for truth, a smoke for lust, a smoke for fear, and the thick black smoke that could kill a man outright. My spells should suffice. She was stronger at the wall, even stronger than in Ashai. Melisandre's magic is real. There is actual power in fire, but we get to see in this little passage and a few others that there's all these other practices associated with it that she's kind of latched onto, that the followers have projected onto it, like the placement of candles, the use of powders, the fire must never go out, which people may have come to believe around this actually functional magic, but we don't really know if it really helps. And all of this is to say nothing of the messy magic people would believe in completely separate to your magic system, like garlic and gemstones. And by the way, I have 3 whole chapters on hard magic and soft magic and how they intersect with world building and storytelling in Volume 1, while Volume 2 goes into hard and soft world building and how magic plays into all of that, which is really relevant here, I feel. I feel like I'm reading some fantasy stories, and I don't want to name names here, but they go, this is magic in our world, this is our magic system, and this is really the only magic people believe in. They might have different, interpretations of the magic from culture to culture, but this is the magic that there is. And that is kind of strange, because people are going to have lots of beliefs outside that. Like, Vikings thought they were imbuing their swords with the spirits of the dead by burning the bones of their fallen in the fires they're using to make swords, but guess what? They were making an early kind of steel by infusing their iron with carbon. People will still believe that sort of thing, and like wearing amulets or garlic, they might not even really think of it as magic, but just using the invisible properties of the world around them. Because the reality is, a lot of magic really comes down to humanity's evolutionary Pokemon superpower, pattern recognition. We look for things which look kind of similar to each other, we might call it natural sympathy. You're like, oh hey, bloodstone looks a little bit like blood, so maybe we could use that to ward off internal bleeding if we, guess what, drink it. Bloodstone does not taste good. So yeah, invent a magic system, look at how it's going to impact your world building, but invent a magical culture that goes beyond your powers and limits and rules and whatever. And you know what? All of this gets even messier because the term magic itself is honestly a bit of a loaded term historically. We often use the term magic in fantasy world building as a catch-all for any otherworldly powers: tell the future, healing wounds, shoot chickens with lightning bolts.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
But historically, the label magic was often a classification of legitimacy. We get a little bit of this in some stories where characters will insist that their powers aren't magic.
It's not magic, it's water bending.
Magic being here used as a term to dismiss it, but let me ask you a question. Is prayer magic? Kinda, but we don't call it that. Saying I prayed for my home feels like a very different thing to saying, and with this incantation over my homestead, I invoke the power of God! Scholarship has generally started to move away from using the term magic because a lot of what old manuscripts describe as magic, which I've been reading for this video, were often just another person's religion or science. And historically, the line between what magic and religion and science was pretty blurry and all about perspective anyway. But in this way, the term magic can be an expression of power dynamics. Colonial powers would often label indigenous rituals as, quote, magic. But again, it's not as simple as that. Think about the garlic. People at the time might have been hanging this outside their doors, not because it's their religion or anything, but because, that's what garlic does. It wards off spirits. But if someone was unfamiliar with that, they might point at it and go, "It's a witch! Magic!" Of course it's not going to ward off spirits. You need asparagus to do that. Sometimes the label was about calling people fraudulent, and there's been some extensive writing now, which I've been reading for this video, and you can see references, that the term was often to describe inappropriate religious ritual. What I mean here is a woman might do the exact same real religious ritual as a man, but it might be inappropriate for her to do it because of her sex, and so they labeled that as magic. Which itself did lead to the common idea that women's magic is evil and wrong, and I'm sure that had no historical consequences whatsoever. But even the term superstition, which we tend to take as meaning non-scientific and irrational, was actually originally used to describe basically bad or excessive religious practice. Not necessarily having no power, not being fraudulent, but being morally questionable in how it's done. In the Roman period, there was a conflict between public polis religion in the cities and private domestic rituals in households, which were sometimes seen as competing with the public stuff. Think government orchestrated rituals versus privately praying in your home. And as this conflict escalated, people started to label these unregulated domestic rituals as magic because they were associated with being politically and socially subversive. What I'm getting at here is we often go, this is the magic system, and we draw lines through it based on the powers and rules and limits. This is evocation, and this is divination, and this is necromancy. When sometimes what's classed as magic or not magic or something else entirely, or legitimate or illegitimate or natural or unnatural, which rules are really rules or which costs are really costs, these can be social classifications, sociological lines which are going to impact how the magic system itself is interpreted and used, as well as any of that messy magical belief which is naturally going to sprout from it. It's about how magic is understood as a concept in itself within your world, and I think that goes a step beyond a lot of what people do when they're world-building magic. And thinking about how certain practices weren't necessarily thought of as magic, but just dealing with the natural properties of the world, sometimes in fantasy, what is magic to one person might just be the natural abilities of another. This actually shows up in Lord of the Rings when Sam looks at Galadriel's magic mirror. She says, "For this is what your folk would call magic, I believe, though I do not understand clearly what they mean, and they also seem to use the same word for the deceits of the enemy. But this, if you will, is the magic of Galadriel. Did you not say that you wish to see elf magic?" Because for elves, their art, their craft isn't magical, it's just what they do. It being unbreakable and glowing in the dark, that's not a magical quality to them, it's just how they make things. This is again thinking about a magic not just as systems of power, but as social phenomenons, even within the world. And I think this may bring us closer to the fantastical worlds we create. I started thinking about this topic after I was reading the Lacnunga, which is this old Anglo-Saxon manuscript. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it was going through all these really interesting healing recipes and medicines and stuff like that. And the line between medicine and magic and science and stuff was really blurry and really interesting to get an insight into that culture. I've made world building videos on how like empires rise and work and fall and how revolutions really play out and death, how that impacts your world. I've got videos on hard and soft world building and magic systems, and those videos are great, but I can never be as in-depth as I would love to be with these discussions on YouTube. You know, with YouTube, I've got to be thinking about the algorithm and thumbnails and all this other stuff. And that is fundamentally why I wrote the On Writing and World Building series, so that I could take all of these discussions and put them into these easier to read and reference books and go deeper and wider with better analysis and examples and way more exclusive content in here that I'm ever able to do on YouTube. Seriously, I wrote these books thinking, 500 people were going to get them. And then I was astounded because we've now sold like 120,000 copies, something like that. Each of the volumes stand entirely on their own, covering different topics, but if you only want to get one of them, I recommend getting the third one. I think it's the best. I think it's got the most as well, and there will be another volume coming one day. Of course, you can get all of them as audiobooks, paperbacks, ebooks, all you like. If you like these discussions but you want to go deeper, then these are the next step. And thank you so much, because this is the whole other side of my career, writing, publishing. You can read my fiction, by the way, at the links down below, or you can pick up my book, Catalog for the End of Humanity, which has some pretty cool world building in it as well, and also interesting magic. Or if you want to join the community more deeply, I've got my Patreon. You can join our writing workshops. There's the Discord over there. We're always talking about writing and world building, all that sort of stuff. I'd love for you to join us. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.